Hey, what's going on, guys? I just wanted to do a little video guide on telephoto lenses. When I first started out, I was horribly confused about which telephoto lens to go with. I was on a budget. I didn't want to spend any more money than I needed to, but I wanted to get the best image quality possible. And it was very confusing because you have a lot of professional shooters who are out there telling you that you need the biggest, most expensive lens, and not a lot of people that are giving, I guess, real world consumer advice. So I kind of wanted to go over some lenses and try to help you out. Now, I'm a Canon shooter, but what I'm going to say also applies to Nikon. Their lens selection, pricing, and aftermarket manufacturers of lenses are pretty similar for those two systems. For your other systems, the lens selection is not the same, and although they make some great cameras and great lenses, the options just aren't necessarily there. I will talk a little bit about Sony because I also own a Sony, but let's jump into it. When you buy your camera, a lot of times you get an option for like a 55 to 250 millimeter lens, which is commonly referred to as a kit lens. This one's kind of similar to this. This is the 70 to 300 millimeter by Canon. It's about $200 at your big box stores. Sometimes you can get it for around $100 with the purchase of another Canon product. It doesn't have image stabilization. As you zoom it, you can see that it retracts and expands. It's made of plastic. It's very lightweight. This lens is not the best lens in the world, to be honest with you. If you're going to shoot during the daytime, and if you're only going to post photos to like Facebook and Instagram, this is a great lens for you. But if you want to get serious about your photography, you need to step up into something more expensive. The image quality, although it's good, and you can get some great shots with this, it's not going to be as sharp. You're really going to notice the problems with this lens in low light. If you plan on shooting, like, let's say, a football game on a Friday night, or you want to shoot a basketball game or an awards presentation indoors, you're going to have problems with this lens. This lens has what's called a variable aperture. It starts at f4, and as you zoom it out, or zoom in, I guess, it goes to 5.6. What that means is it's letting less light back to your camera sensor. So that means you either have to increase your ISO or slow your shutter speed down. Increasing your ISO is going to cause loss of detail in your image. Slowing your shutter speed down means that you're going to introduce motion blur into the image. So this lens is a good value, and if you just want to get some decent shots at a distance, it's okay. But if you want to get serious about it and you really want sharp pictures, or you want to blow them up and print them, you're going to want to spend more money than this. But if all you're going to do is shoot soccer games on Saturday mornings and post them to Facebook, this is all the lens you're really going to need. This lens here is the Sony Next version of basically the same type of lens. It's the 55 to 210. It does the same thing. It has a variable aperture, so as you zoom it, less light's going to get to your sensor. You run into the same issues. The great thing about the Sony Next is it does have an incredibly high ISO range. So I was playing around with this at a football game a few weeks ago, bumped it all the way up to 25,000 ISO, and I was able to get some okay shots with this. Yes, the images were noisy. Yes, the color replication wasn't 100% accurate, but it was just to post some pictures to Facebook, and it worked fine. This is the lens and camera body that I use whenever I go to places like Disneyland and things like that, where I know I'm not going to print the pictures and blow them up. I'm not trying to sell them to anybody. It's just stuff for like Facebook, Instagram, so the image quality is fine for that type of system. You can also go the route that I did when I first started out. I used an old 35 millimeter lens with my Sony Next because, well, I'm cheap and I don't like spending money, and I already had some old 35 millimeter lenses. So I had to buy this little adapter here, which was like 12 or 15 bucks on eBay, and then I was able to mount this onto my Sony Next. The problem with this cheap one is you lose the ability to autofocus. They do make some that apparently you can autofocus with, but those mounts are very expensive to buy, those adapters, and I never got around to it. I switched to Canon and got a little more serious about my photography. Once you get to the point that you are serious about it, you either want to sell your images, you want to print them, because that's really where you're going to see the distortion start to come in, is when you print them and the bigger the prints start getting. You're going to want to step up into like a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. This is the lens that I think every photographer should own. No matter whether you want to be a sports photographer, you want to be a portrait photographer, this is a great all-around lens with great performance. This particular one is Sigma's version of the 70 to 200. It's a phenomenal lens. The Canon version of this lens will set you back about $2,500 for the newest model. This one's about $1,200. The image quality is a little bit less than the Canon version, but it's not a significant difference. It also autofocuses just slightly slower than Canon's, but most people will never notice the difference. For half the price, I think that it's worth the money personally. Tamron also makes one. I haven't shot the Tamron version, but from what I've heard, the image quality rivals Canon and Nikon's. It's supposed to be a phenomenal lens, and again, I think it's about half the price. With the 70 to 200s, especially with Sigma and Tamron, you want to make sure you get one of the newer versions. I had the older version of this lens that was not image stabilized. The image quality was terrible. Sigma and Tamron have really come a long way in the last year or so with their image quality, and now they're able to compete with the bigger manufacturers, so I would recommend staying away from the older versions. The older version of the Canon that's non-image stabilized in 70 to 200 is pretty good. I had that one before this one. The image quality was pretty good. But what these lenses have is they have a fixed f2.8 aperture. So what that means is that as you zoom in and out, your camera body's staying the same length, or your lens is staying the same length. It's not getting bigger or smaller, and the aperture is not changing. So that really helps out a lot in low light situations, because you're able to let more light get back to the camera sensor, keep your ISO down, keep your shutter speed up, and avoid things like motion blur. These lenses are kind of big and they are kind of heavy. I personally hand-hold this lens when I shoot it, but you can get, or usually it comes with the tripod or monopod adapter on it. But it's a big lens, and it'll definitely get some looks whenever you're out shooting with it. But they're great. One of the great things about these lenses over these kind of lenses is how fast the autofocus system works. Especially for me, I do a lot of sports photography. I need to be able to focus on a subject and transition and re-achieve autofocus in a hurry so I can get the shot. With this lens, there's a delay sometimes of over a second. With this one, it's near instantaneous. If I miss a shot with this lens on, it's usually because I just didn't get on the subject fast enough. It's usually not because the system doesn't autofocus fast enough. You can also pick up some great deals on these lenses. I got this one for $600 off of Craigslist. So it became a cost to benefit ratio. The savings of almost $2,000 outweighed the image quality performance I would have got by buying the Canon version. But if you want the best image quality, go with the Canon or Nikon version. And when you really want to get serious about your photography, you want to step up into something like this. This is Canon's 300mm telephoto lens. This is what some people refer to as super telephoto. These lenses are big, they're heavy, they're expensive, but they're worth their weight in gold. A brand new version of this lens would set you back about $6,500, but it's phenomenal. You won't find a lens that is sharper. The separation that it creates from your background, your bokeh, is just amazing. The autofocus is so fast on this, and it's got some cool features on it. You've got focus presets, which, to be honest with you, I never use. But one of the great things about this is that it has a focus limiter. So let's say you know that you're going to be shooting something that's 20 feet away and nothing closer than that. You just set this little switch here and it's only going to focus from that point and beyond. It speeds up autofocusing, and it's also great for situations like last week I shot some tennis matches and I didn't like the spots that they had assigned for the photographers to shoot from. They wanted us to shoot from the side of the court along the net area. I was getting a lot of shots of players' backs and things like that as the ball was hit to the opposite side of the court from where I was. I wanted to be behind the players shooting across so that I could get their face and the ball traveling towards me. They wouldn't let us shoot from there, but we could stand outside of the chain link fence and shoot directly into the players. Well, with this lens, I used the focus limiter and I set it to where it wouldn't near focus. So it was almost like the fence wasn't there. It just focused right through the fence. I was able to get some great shots of the players with them facing me, the ball in the shot. Whereas like the Sigma that I had used the first day of the tournament, it doesn't have a focus limiter. So when I was shooting, about half the shots my autofocus was grabbing onto the fence and I got a picture of chain link instead of the player. So it's got great options, great features. This is also a fixed f2 aperture, and it's just phenomenal. But unless you're really serious about your photography, you're trying to sell photos, you're making large prints, it's really not a necessity for most people. I've gotten some great pictures with these lenses, all three of these, that I've actually even sold to other people. They weren't necessarily the sharpest, but unless you're trying to blow the image up, most people are never going to notice. When you're talking about a small image on a cell phone screen for social media, these image issues become less of a problem for a photographer, because the images simply aren't big enough for people to see that fine resolution and detail. So it becomes kind of a exercise in futility to step up to something like this unless you really need it. Two other things. If you want to get some extra reach, one of the problems with like the 70-200 is it's simply too short for a lot of high school action, like football and soccer. The fields are just so big. You spend so much time either chasing players or waiting for players to come to you to get a shot. You can add things like a teleconverter. This is Sigma's version of the teleconverter. This is Canon's version of the teleconverter. It helps you to add an extra roughly 40% of focal length to your camera or to your lens. All that it does is you just simply attach it to the back of your lens and then put it on your camera and you're good to go. With the Sigma, I noticed a fair amount of loss of image quality using it. It wasn't significant, it wasn't horrible, but it was there. With the Canon version on this body, it was amazing. It was almost like the thing wasn't on there. I really couldn't tell the difference in the image quality with or without the teleconverter. Now these teleconverters won't attach to the cheaper lenses. You've got to step up to like Canon's L Professional series, which is like these white version of the lenses for the teleconverters to be able to attach. But it's a great way to get some extra focal length when you want to shoot. Any one of these lenses will do a great job for daytime sports photography. If you want to shoot at night or indoors, you're going to want something like this. For wildlife photography, this lens, to be honest with you, is just too short. You're really going to spend a lot of time waiting and a lot of frustration with a 70-200, even with the teleconverter, trying to get animals close enough to you. I took this lens out with the teleconverter on a Canon 7D, which is a crop sensor, and without getting too much into that, that adds even more focal length. And this lens was still even a little too short to shoot a lot of birds that I was trying to get photos of. I spent a lot of time waiting for the birds to get close enough to me to get shots. You're really going to want to be up in around a 400mm or longer lens. It's just the reality of wildlife photography. You need the biggest lens you can get. If you want to know more about any one of these lenses specifically in detail, check out my other videos, and I will have reviews up on the pros and cons of each one of these specifically. But hopefully that gives you a general guide to telephoto lenses and can kind of help you out.